need to ask.
All right, thanks. So I've started recording the session now.
Okay. So in Microsoft Edge, I'm trying to share my screen and it's saying there's an error in that. Hold up. It's very strange. Guess I'll have to.
You use the mic. You use the Mac, right?
Yes. So there's this. It says when I click on share on my Edge, it says there was a problem sharing on your screen. Try a different web browser. So I just want to try a different one.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry about this. I'll close this and join.
Okay. Yeah. We see your screen now.
Yeah. So I'll just put this at the top. So I hope it. Okay. Yeah. Finally, this is working. Sorry about the delay. So yeah, let's just get into it. So today we'll be talking about the role of research in design. A lot of what we're focusing on is how we can use user research to back design decisions and, should I say, design optimal products and experiences for users. Um, I'd like to do an introduction of myself. My name is Emmanuel Adigwe. I'm a product designer. I've been designing for a couple of years now. Fun things about me is I talk a lot. That's why you can see noisemaker on the screen. Um, yeah, if and I hope to talk within the given period. The plan was to make it shorter and get as much questions as possible. Another thought interesting fact about me is I play table tennis and I get really serious about it, hoping to be semi-pro at some point. Um, so I'll start today's talk with a quote. Yeah, um, it's by Mark Twain. He's not a designer, but it's interesting how this quote like speaks to the whole point of what we're talking about today. It says, "Supposing is good, but finding out is better." So when we talk about user research, we're talking about something that focuses on understanding user expectations, right? You can see on the screen that it doesn't just stop there, because sometimes you find that people seem to think that it's only at expectation it stops. The good thing about this is you can cover behavior, you can cover needs and the motivations that back people's decisions or when they interact with your product. A lot of this can be gotten through observation and feedback. I highlighted those two parts importantly because you find that regardless of whatever research method you use, they come in these two forms. Um, Either you're observing or you're getting some form of feedback. If you're getting a feedback, it usually comes in a user reported form. So what that is like is an example of that is when you run surveys. Users would answer your question, they're reporting something to you. If you run an interview session, users will tell you stuff about themselves, about their experience with your product. They're doing self-reporting. And that's what really user research is about. Now, I need to talk about something that will lay foundation for what we're going to talk about today and what we're going to learn today. Is it's probably been said several times, and I hope it doesn't lose its importance, is that you as a designer, you're not your user. And this statement raises the need for research, right? Because if we were our users, if we could tap into the brains of people, if we could do the whole sit down in a place and just tap in and connect to everyone, right? There'll be no need for research. We'll just sit down and design and make all the decisions, and we know we've done it well. But we're not the people we're designing for. Hence the need for user research. Now, one interesting thing you would know and you would notice, especially for people that are designers here, or maybe technical people in projects, you would notice that for every design project, right? You would notice that in those projects, there's several sets of decisions that are made. And the thing about making decisions is you could decide to make decisions on a whim. You could decide to make decisions based on assumptions that you've not validated. And you could also decide to make decisions based on facts or something that is backed by research in this case. Um, and the last part is what we're trying to point to, right? Validating your design decisions. Sometimes we have questions during this project, and some of those questions is what I've put on the screen. The first one says, what should we design? Most of the time, this comes at the very beginning of a project. You're not sure how you should go about this design. How do we create this optimal experience that we're aiming for? Who should we design for? Let's say it's a new product in the market, and you feel okay, it should be for the general market. But you sit down and realize that, okay, we need to narrow down to who our primary target user is. And who is that? There are other times where you're asking questions why. For example, a client brings a project to you. The client says it's going to be groundbreaking. It's going to change the world. But you want to know why. Why this project and why are we making these decisions? Somebody says, let's add this feature to this app, and you want to know why. Because the why behind that is what motivates you to ask more questions and get deeper knowledge about people you're designing for. One of my favorite parts is how well did we do? And I think this is one part that a lot of designers should start to try and do a lot. Majorly because if you think about it, when you're designing product experiences, you should be focused on the outcomes, right? You should be focused on the goal of the project was to ensure that users could sign up with ease and create their account and start trading. Were we able to do that? And why that's important is if you're a member, like if you're a member of a design team or you're the only one and you work for a company, if you're able to do this, you can communicate your value as a designer or as a design team. And the great thing about that is research can help you do that, right? And I'll talk about how you can do this later on. If you're conversant with product life cycle, development life cycle, you'd realize that it always starts from nothing to something, then the post life of it, right? Where it's in the market, and you now can tell if all those hours you spent were valuable time. Now, the good thing about research is that you can actually carry out research at each and every one of these stages, even after you've launched. When you carry out research at the beginning, most teams call this foundational research or generative research, right? It's the very first set of research you're doing. And the questions you're mostly asking at this stage is what, why, and who are we designing for, or should we design for? Once you start to fledge out your designs, maybe in prototype stage, you start to do some form of research, right? And the questions you're asking is, how should we design this? Because sometimes, like when you start a prototype, you're not really sure, right? So chances are you carry out a usability test on your wireframes, most likely a hallway gorilla usability test, just to see if your layout structure is well understood. You can also decide, well, when you've got into like a consumable state of your prototype, you could do a fully fledged usability test where you're checking out to see if there are any usability flaws um, in the design. After launching, you can then ask the question, how well did we do? And this was what I talked about before. And one of the things you could use for this is, I think a lot of teams use this. You can use web analytics, right? And what this does for you is it tells you it gives you quantitative data of people's usage on your platform or your product. Um, One interesting thing about web analytics and mostly all quantitative research is they leave you with questions. I'll give you an example. You run a survey on your live platform and you're asking people about their experience and they give you feedback. Now, say 80% of the people that gave feedback say they don't like the about us page, and 20 say they do. That will leave you with a question. The question will be why, right? So one of the good things about this post-launch stage is even though you do web analytics, you could combine that with some usability tests. You could create a scenario that is similar to what you asked in the in the survey, or what you pictured in the analytics, right? And create that kind of scenario in usability test just to see the reason behind why maybe some people are displeased with the experience. Now, I've talked about how it's so impossible to say you cannot conduct research at any point of your product development lifecycle, right? Now, one interesting thing is in the examples I've given a few, but just to name more, right? We have contextual inquiries, diary studies at very early stages. I won't go in deep into this. My hope is that in other sessions that I have, I can talk more about this research methods. For design research, I've talked about usability tests. You can also carry out eye tracking. Eye tracking is one method that you can do when you're interested in what people see, what they see first, and where they focus a lot of their attention on, and what part of your web page is calling their attention also. Tree testing gives you a lot of knowledge about how people navigate sites. So if you build a product, you want to be sure if people can find that one thing, right? For post-launch research, like I said, you could do analytics, usability tests, and surveys. And one thing you start to see from this point is research can play a role throughout the entire stage of a project, and it means that it can go hand in hand with your design, right? Now, this graphic here, I placed this here intentionally for the purpose of just explaining the fact that you see the users out there in the market, they have the answers in the sense that they have answers to the questions that we have. Most of the time we're designing for humans. There's sometimes people design for robots, but most of the time we're designing for humans, right? And we have some questions about our products. Like if you look at this part here, can users use our product? You're not sure. And you don't want to launch the market if you don't have that answer. And you want to get an answer to that, right? So you carry out usability tests with a user, and engaging that user in that test can give you an answer to whether they can use the product, right? In this case, you see that the answer to that is the new update gives me pain, right? It sounds self-reported, and that's one of the good things about research. You could also run interviews, right, with users and ask them about their experience with the product that you newly designed. Another good thing about how user research, the role it plays in design projects is, like I said, there's also this part where even just beyond you as a designer, the business team, most of the time, I don't know if a lot about experiences, but most of the time when you work with business teams, they seem really sure about what they think users need. Sometimes you find that teams would quickly draw out a user requirement document, and what they have there are assumptions that they stated as facts. They haven't validated any of this, but they stated them as facts. But the good thing about research is research can actually build that bridge, right, between the business people, their assumptions, and what is actually out there, what the user actually needs, right? Because once you start to carry out research, you can actually now validate those assumptions that the business team has. Most of the time, if you don't do that, your product is most likely going to fail. And in this graphic here, you can see the failure shark just lurking around and waiting for someone to fail. Now, you might be having a few questions about, okay, what research method should I try? And I know a lot of people have asked these questions and this question, and one very good way to answer these questions, like what method should I try? What's the right method for our team at this point in time? Is to look at what questions you have as a team, what question you have as a designer. I've written out 4 questions and some of the appropriate research methods for these questions. The first question is, who are our users? And one way you can actually get an answer to this is to run interviews with people. The good thing about interviews is if you have a good skill to run interviews, if you ask open-ended questions and you don't ask leading questions, you get to know more about people, right? Because you give them that freedom to tell you more about themselves. And that way you can actually now synthesize your data about these people and create some form of visual representation of them in form of personas. Another question is, how do people solve a problem? You're curious, how do people solve this problem that we think is out there currently? How do they go about that? And one way you can do that is you can actually observe them use this product. If it's an existing product you're planning to redesign, you can observe people use the product and see where the problems are. How do they, is there any workaround they found for those problems? Is it that the problem doesn't exist for some users or exists for others? Contextual inquiries are also similar to observations. It's just that contextual inquiry has the interview part to it because you combine that with the observation. The third question is, can people use the product? I probably must have said usability test a lot in this in today's session, maybe because I like it a lot, right? Because it's so effective in telling you if people can use a product. How do people find stuff? Tree testing does that for you, right? Because your navigation is a way people is a route people use to find links that will direct them to their goals, right? So with tree testing, you can actually see if people can find maybe the very last part of your navigation, or they can find what they're looking for in your site. Now, at every point of your design, you should always have research following it, right? And when I talk about research, one of the things you'll find that people always think about at first is primary research. But there's an interesting angle to research in the sense that you could also run secondary research. Secondary research is when you know someone credible or a source credible has done research on this, and you can go online or go maybe offline, maybe it's in a library somewhere, you go to the company and get the data they have. And the interesting thing about secondary research is almost every one of us, we do this. If you've gone online to check maybe the stats of some sports person or performance of somebody over a period of time, that's research. You're reading the research someone else has done on it, right? And you can also bring this into your design process. The visual here just says research should always drive your decisions, right? Wherever you're going towards, whatever decision you want to make, take empathy with that and let research be behind all your design decisions. Something that is interesting, and I mentioned the secondary research for a purpose, is research is everyone's beans, right? It's everyone's work. Even the PM, that's the developers also. Anyone in the team can provide any source of research. I remember when I was working on a project last year, trying to design a platform to unearth trade opportunities within Africa. We got a lot of success because we had a research team that were really good in digging out data, right? And what that did for us was, regardless of the fact that we're designers, and this research team was not the design research team you probably know them as, they're a data study team kind of. And because they were able to get this rich data, it helped us push and make quicker decisions, right? We no longer, so one of the good things about this research is you have confidence in the decisions you're taking, right? If you're going to make a lot of assumptions, you most likely would say, should we do it? Maybe. But when research backs every decision you take, you realize that the confidence is heavily built and you start to make a lot of quick decisions and you move on quickly and you know you're moving in the right direction, right? So let everyone realize that it's their responsibility and they can take it. And just like a wise man said, Ejeko cook, be part of the cooking process. Join hands together and be part of your research output. You can actually reach out to other members of your team that are not designers and let them be part of. They might even, one interesting thing you might not know is the moment you leave your ego outside, the moment you leave that pride outside, you realize that the non-designers that you look down at actually might be good facilitators for some of your research sessions, right? Um, Now, I want to talk about something that over time I've discovered. And the reason why I've discovered this is I've been able to, I've been in positions where people have like reached out to maybe get some form of assessment on case studies or projects they've worked on. One other thing I like to do on the side, if I'm very free, is to just read people's projects, like their case studies and all. And I think one thing that you start to find that is so common is the fact that some people fake research in what they're reporting. And the reason why I'm so confident to say this is the more research you carry out, right, the easier it is for you to identify lies. Um, Sometimes you find that people say they did an interview, right? Because this is one scenario I once saw where someone said they did an interview, right? And their findings from that interview came in as in quantitative form. And that alone is a red flag because those two don't link together, right? And you find that maybe what I just said now, the example I've just given seems like it's the easiest of them. But the interesting thing about it is when you start to link all the research methods together in a case study, you can actually tell someone carried out the research, right? So try not to fake research. Research is not a formality. Don't see it as that. Don't see it as something that make it not be like, say, then reject the project. We need to put research to it so that it will be sweet. Do it because you want to have empathy for people that will use the product and because you like that duty of having empathy. Care for people that want to use your, if at all, if there's anything that should drive you to do research, it's the point that people will use the research, sorry, use the product that you're designing. I remember when I was working in the bank, Access Bank, and one of these days in the evening, I was in the bus and I saw someone using Access Mobile at the time. And it struck me, right, that a lot of our decisions were made on at the time we're using Adobe XD in the team, and a lot of our decisions were just made on Adobe XD. It just felt like no one was there, it was just me and my laptop. But guess what? This product we're designing was for everyday people making important decisions. Sometimes some people would want to make payments right there. If you've not designed that product well through research, you're going to affect someone's day badly, right? So try and avoid faking research for the purpose of formality. Do research. And one thing I promise you is the more research you do, the more you'd love it because it builds confidence and you realize that, oh, wow, why didn't I start doing research a long time ago? Now, one of the questions that people would ask, and it's a very valid question, in as much as it sounds quite funny sometimes, is should I ever skip research? Do we need research? And people always ask these questions for very credible reasons that I'll talk about later. But to cut the story short, the answer is no. Don't ever skip research. Whatever reason that you think is stopping you from doing research is not a valid reason to stop doing research or avoid it. If you could do the littlest research, do it. Remember, we brought up the point of secondary research. So even if you're in a team where your boss is, if let's say you're working, let me just give you a very weird scenario. You work for the military, right? And you're trying to get buy-in. And they're like, if you don't do this design, they're going to put you in prison or something. Just go get secondary research. Someone somewhere out there has done secondary research. So there's no excuse for you to say that there was no form of research that was done on the project, or you skipped it because there was no time. Now, like I just said, we should never skip it, right? There are other reasons why you shouldn't, and I would not talk about the negative aspects of when you say no to research. I'm going to look at the positives. Yeah. So number one, research helps you to design valuable and useful experiences for design for users. And if you think about it, like I remember one time when I was getting into user research, I've forgotten where I found that. And it was this simple. He said, if you're going to design products for people you don't understand, how do you expect them, right, to understand your product? Because it feels like you're designing for someone else. So once you start to do research, you're designing better experiences for people. At the same time, it helps you to find all those hidden user problems. So at the very beginning of a project, your stakeholders might be making guesses of what they think a regular or everyday user problem is, right? But if you conduct research, you would actually find more. And one of the interesting things is you might find problems that invalidate what your stakeholders have, right? You might find other things that really say that, oh, that assumption someone had in the team, right, was wrong, and this is what it is. An example of that is you probably be in a team, and if there's any designer on the call, one thing you would notice is sometimes when you're in meetings, people like to use this phrase, the average person. And if not every time that statement is used, you find that it's an attempt to project themselves into this hypothetical average person. Um, like I said, most of the time, it's a lie. Because when you ask people, when they say, oh, imagine you're designing an app for everyday people, your primary user, for example, market women, you might find that somebody in team comes out and say, an average market woman does this, does that. In most of the cases, when you ask these people and say, how did you come up with the average, a representation of the average market woman? You'll find that it was just an assumption and not a fact, right? So most times it's always good to identify assumptions the way they are and use research to verify if that assumption is true. The fourth one is my favorite, and it speaks to articulating design decisions to stakeholders. Now, in everyday work we do as designer, articulating our design decision is so important. And I feel this is one thing people don't talk about a lot, because it's not enough for you to be a great designer. The next thing you need to be is a great communicator, right? Because when you think about it, every time we design, you probably would design some set of screens. There's always someone that you have to report to get an approval from, right? Now, if you cannot articulate your design decisions properly, you're not going to get an approval. Your designs will probably get overridden by someone else's opinion in that meeting. And you end up with an awful design that you know about. But because you cannot articulate your design decisions better, right? Your design was overridden by bad choices. And you ask me how to do that. Research is one of the first ways to do that. Because with research, you can actually now back your decisions with facts, right? You can back your decisions with data. So you go into those meetings and somebody says, oh boy, on this UI, why don't we have this? And we should put this and put that. And you know it's wrong. You don't just know it's wrong because you're a designer, no. You know it's wrong because while you were making these design decisions, even before that, you had done some form of user research and you found that, oh, we can't go that route. Because if we go that route, this is what will happen and this is what will happen, right? You realize that that's the first step of actually helping you to articulate your design decisions better. There's some challenges that we have in that you would face in user research. And I know it's interesting that you can see that you is one of the examples. And I don't mean like you are bad for user research. No, it's as simple as your expertise can affect the quality of the research you carry out. And your inability to identify your biases can also affect how you carry out your research. Sometimes people have this bias that they might not be aware of. An example of that would be something like you decide to only talk to some particular set of people because you want the research to end up in a particular way. You know, if you include the other set of people in this research, it's going to change the data, and that's not the approach you wanted to take. Now, what you realize in that scenario is you are bad for that particular research. So that's why I put you as one of the examples of the challenges, because I feel like every time you go online and you check for challenges or you read books, nobody talks about this, right? We can be one of the problems of research if we decide not to do it right. Sometimes you also find that, if not every time, resources can be hindrances. An example is there's no time. We need to launch. There's no time, bro. Like we need some screens already. Now, to be honest, these are real life scenarios and these are real world problems. And it's very difficult to navigate. There's no one answer, one fine answer to say every time you are faced with a problem with time, this is what you should do, right? But one thing I'll tell you for sure is the higher the maturity of your team towards design, the less of these problems you have. And where that draws to is as a designer, you can help your team improve their design maturity. And how do you do that? Before the need for research or before the need for maybe designing a product, you can always talk about design in ways that will sound very compelling to people. One of the tricks I used to do before was in an office WhatsApp group, I'll share videos of maybe disabled people struggling to get into a building because there was no accessible staircase, or maybe someone finding it hard to use a basic tool. And I try to stay away from digital products. And why those things were interesting is every time I'll share videos like that, people will go berserk and say, what? Why didn't they do accessible stairs? Why didn't they do it like that? And not to spoil the party and spoil the fun of it, I'd come in the middle and be like, yeah, this is what we do when we don't do this. And there's obviously silence there where everybody just goes, oh, okay, we too we're part of the problem. And what that does is it starts to wake people's minds up in your team. It's a gradual process, right? And stakeholders are also part of it, right? Just like I said, sorry everyone, just hold on a bit. I need to attend to something.
That's fine. Yeah. So thanks so much.
I'm back. No, I'm back. It
Okay.
was just a pause.
All right. So just keep your question ready. When it's done, we'll take questions.
Okay, let me just wrap everything up. You see, I told you guys at the beginning when I talk about design, I
You have
seem to stay a
time.
lot
You
of
have
time.
time. You have time. Go on. Go on.
Okay. So the last challenge you probably face with user research is recruitment of participants. And to be honest, this is probably one of the most difficult ones. Say you've gotten buy-in, you have all the resources. Now you have to depend on humans to attend your research. Um, One interesting thing is you'll find that you can recruit people. They say yes, they would come, and on the D day they don't show up, right? So let me share a trick that I've tried recently and it works. is you can play on people's psychology, right? So when you're recruiting them, and I hope participants are not here so they find the trick, right? So when you're recruiting participants, yeah, you can always ask them questions like, do they stick to their words and do they stick to their promises? Right. Now, the interesting about humans is everyone will always answer yes to that because no one always
Wow.
wants to say they don't. Now, yeah, like I say, you're playing on people's psychology. So once they say yes, they keep to their promises, and you send an invite, they know they said they keep to promises. So they will always want to keep to those promises and show up. So it's just a trick that you can play on people and let them just show up, right? Inclusion is important. Try not to exclude people that you know are important to your research. Always bring them in. And that is also linked to you also, right? If you have that bias against a particular set of people, don't do that. Include them in your research. I want to give, because of time, I'll just give an example of a real life scenario where I, together with the team that I was with at Access Bank, were able to use research to redesign the ATM experience at the time. So we had this project where we needed to solve some of the real problems we had with the ATMs. And the major problem we wanted to solve was reduce queues, right? We wanted to make queues as short as possible in our galleries or anywhere our ATMs were positioned. We had a lot of assumptions at the very beginning of project, right? Which is very natural. People come up and say, I think this is where the problem is, and I think this is what is causing it. So what we did as a team, I think we're a team at the time, we're a team of 5 or so. We decided to carry out contextual inquiries personally, right? During the weekend. So what I did was I went to ATM galleries around Axis Bank ATM galleries, and it sounds probably creepy, but I did it. I just stood in line for like maybe 1 hour, and I was watching people use the ATM. Most importantly, not people what they were doing, but how the queue was moving and the impact of someone's time on the queue. Then I shifted my focus away from the queue to why is this person staying too long at the ATM, right? And that was so resourceful in so many ways because I was able just on my own, right? You can imagine what the rest of the team got, right? But just on my own, I was able to get so much rich data. We found so many things that affect the queues. Let me give an example. So ATMs will tell you that do you want to print a receipt? Yeah, you will select yes. And then the ATM tells you there's no receipt, right? The funny thing is you're asking, why then did it ask for me to print a receipt? There's no receipt, right? And that was one of the things we did with the redesign. We made the ATM smarter in a way that it would know if there's no receipt and we would not ask you that question. Another thing that makes queues longer, if not even destroy the dynamics of queues, is very bad error messages or notifications. An example of that is this error message that comes with your issuer something something. Now, the problem with those most of those statements is they are banky words. Banky words in the sense that you probably need to be in the financial sector or know a lot about financial sector to know what those error messages are. For some of us in this call, we probably have a clue about that. But one thing you should also realize is ATMs are designed for everyday user. So maybe someone that is not learned, like maybe a mechanic, also wants to use the ATM and he sees an error of something like your issuer is unavailable. He's not sure what you mean by issuer, right? So what we tried to also do at Access Bank was to reward error messages and notifications and make them as easy as possible. There's so many other things we discovered, right? But I'm pretty sure that if no research was done, if observation was not conducted, we probably wouldn't have found those things, right? And I'm sharing this not just to like I could have easily just gone ahead to just say some stuff I read somewhere and some experiences and all that, but I need to tell you the story so you know this is real, and you should also carry it and you find how rich this helps you as a designer. So some key takeaways. The first one is you're not your user, engage real people and conduct research. The second one is research can be carried out at all stages of development cycle. Research is not a formality. Don't fake it or your product won't make it. And my final part that I like so much is research is everyone's beans. Ejeko Cook. So I'll be ending this with a quote from Julie Zhu. She says, to find ideas, find problems. To find problems, talk to people. So does anyone have questions?
Wow, that last quote is wow. All right. So I don't know how we're going to do this. Let's see if there's any questions on the chats. So if you have questions, you can drop on the chats. Let's see. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So Emmanuel, we got quite a number of people who registered for the event, but somehow I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll have to do research or possibly speak with members of the community and trying to find out what happened and why we got so low a turnout today.
Yeah.
Okay. So so far your session has been, because you you've been, okay, I wanted to say you've been in the streets, but anyways, okay, so the thing now is you prepped some questions and you prepared answers for them based on your experience and I believe based on your dialogue with designers. So your questions more are like a lot of questions I think I might want to ask. So I don't know if anyone within has questions for us. Would like to take a couple or two. Okay, Gospel says he has a question.
Okay.
So Gospel, I don't know how can you unmute your mic and speak? If you can't, you just type then you get to it. Okay, so you can see the question now.
Yeah, I can. So the first question says, when conducting research on products you're developing, how do you categorize your audience or participants? So what was that? Okay, so when you think about this question, yeah, the first thing, and I like questions like this because it leads to another question, right? So I would ask and I would answer, right? So what I want to ask is, you should ask yourself, why do you want to categorize people, right? And it makes sense that you want to do that categorization. And the reason why you want to do that categorization is you want to have a perfect I don't want to use the word category, but perfect representation of your users, right? You want to put them in perfect niches or Venn diagrams and say, this set of people with these common traits or this common XXY, right, are these people, this set of people with this common blah, blah, blah. Now, you find out that every time you're categorizing, you need common grounds for this, right? Now, the common grounds, especially in design and user research, are built heavily. I'll just go back to the first definition. So they're built heavily on user expectations, user behaviors, their needs and motivations, right? Sometimes you find that people bring in demographics, right? Um, in some cases, demographics are not important, right? Except you're designing for a particular niche of people of a particular demographic, right? But one thing you find is that a banker most likely uses an application the same way as a wrestler uses it, right? And the reason why they do that is maybe what they need on that platform, right, are similar. So one of the ways you can do your categorization is through user behavior, right? So sometimes if you work with teams that do a lot of user personas, you find that they have very funny name for their personas. Maybe they might have this global name like eat a lot or order a lot. Now I'm imagining we're designing like an Uber Eats or Jumia food delivery system. So they'll have this global name aside the normal human name. So they have this alias name that maybe buys food a lot, eats chicken a lot. And what you realize is those names are based off of behavior. And what they've done is they've categorized this certain common ground, right? Which is behavior in this sense, or maybe needs or motivations to create perfect categorization of users. So you can start from here and use this, right, to do categorizations. How do you do these categorizations? You need to do research. And research, one of the ways you can do that, let's say, for example, you do a user interview session and you've talked to some certain part of people, particular set of people, you will start to find some common traits with these people and you're writing those things down. I wish you could pick up a book that I just finished recently. It's called Mental Models, and it's so solid. It helps you to find, should I say, common traits between research participants and create very perfect mental representations of these people. And what that does for you is going forward, you have a perfect representation of these users, and you can tell that these are the people that need your product. So you can check the book out, Mental Models. It's really solid and it helps. It's so good. It's such a great method to
What's the name
categorize
of the author?
your. What is that name again? Can't believe I just forgot her name today. No, Indie Young. Yeah, that's her name. Indie Young. Yeah.
Okay.
Says giving some may not be literate. Okay, Godspar, I'm guessing you're saying you said giving some may not be literate or may not be able to relate to your choice of. Oh, are you referring to the participants in this case? Okay, great. Now, to be honest, right, regardless of people's literate level, you can always conduct research and get quality findings. When I started out my design thingy, like this whole design thing we're doing today, I remember I had this, I'll call it a passion project, which Chooks Ezioke and another designer. And what we did was we're interested in what motivates people to select movies as cinemas or watch a movie. And we just did something so gorilla, right? I'm using the word gorilla because it's a concept. It's called gorilla research. So what we did was we went to the closest cinema. That's the one at Yaba. And we just went there. We went to the waiting room and we started to talk to different set of people. It was a user interview um, method, right? And trust me, we spoke to literates and illiterates. And what we just did was the way we asked number X a question was different from Y because we had this icebreaker set of questions that made us realize who we're talking to and what they understand, right? So now that now determine the kind of questions we asked. And at the same time, we didn't ask questions like robots, right? We're asking questions based on the answers they gave us and doing follow-ups on that. We didn't tell them we wanted to build a website. That might be one of these things that might terrify someone that is an illiterate. When you start to bring the technical part of your research and you say, I want to build a rocket, and talking to you helps me and stuff like that. So when maybe if you notice that you're about to talk to an illiterate, you could even step down your English and step down how you would seem so super serious. Make them comfortable. You would get rich findings. I think illiterates might even give you the best because they might keep on talking for a long time. And it's so exciting when people talk a lot in interviews, especially when they're in line with what you want. You get a lot of rich data, right? So don't come off as very literate, especially with literate people. Yeah. You're welcome, God's power.
All right. Maybe let's see. Any more? Take two.
So one thing I can do after this is I'll share the presentation with Ogene. If anyone wants the presentation, they can have it. And yeah,
All
I
right.
can also share the Figma file if anyone wants to play with that and build on that for any presentation they want to do in the future.
Okay. I think that would be awesome. So that's a link to the Figma file now.
Yeah, more like the saved file actually, because I don't want people to like make changes of that. So yeah. I'll
Okay.
just give maybe a view access, not an edit access. Yeah.
All right, that makes sense. Okay, so I don't think we have any. The
Okay.
turnout is low, and your slides are rich, so it covers a whole lot of aspects. Emmanuel, I appreciate you for accepting to have a session with us, even though the timing was short, but you made the most of it. So thank you so much. As a community, we look forward to having another session with you again. Yeah, out of curiosity, I want to ask, what other topic would you like to speak on that you think it's going to help designers or product designers a lot?
So I like to do this instead, right? And I think it'll be best since you know the community, right? And you know a lot of people. You can have a democratic voting thing here. I can share a link that helps to do that, where everyone comes around and they talk about what they want to learn. We find the top topics, and if I'm passionate and I want to talk about that, why not? So that way, at least I know that what I'm sharing is something that people are interested in. So I just copied the link for that. It's a very good tool for creating online polls. So you guys can do it and just pick the topics you want to hear about. Then I'll look at them and pick the one I can talk about.
All right. Okay. Okay. So okay, that's nice. I think we had something like that where we came up with some topics. So when we agreed on research, I decided to reach out to you because I remember the first time I reached out to you on Twitter,
Yeah.
chat conversations, and how deep down you went about research. I was like, wow, you should be the best person to reach out to right now. So okay, so I'll run around that with my community, and so thank you so much. So
You're
that's it.
welcome.
The recording we made available on this event page, and also a link to on it to be on YouTube. All right, thank you so much, Emmanuel, and thanks to everyone
All
who showed.
right.
It's a great
You
time.
too. Have a great one.
All right.
Bye, everyone. Bye.